Fight commentary breakdowns. As promised, guys, I will translate the interview with the Wing Chun master. This is the guy, if you remember, he fought the one-armed boxer and got completely decimated. He couldn't really apply his Wing Chun. Look at that. So, they did an interview with the Wing Chun master afterwards to get his side of the story. Why did he lose the fight? He's exactly saying what his student was saying, which is that he felt like the whole thing was rigged. He says he felt like they were the ones that were kind of reacting to a lot of things. So, look at this. Apparently, there were 7 of them on his side, the Wing Chun side, and the match only gave them a meal that had 2 entrees. And then, so until the match happened at 8 in the evening, so they only had a meal that had 2 entrees. So, well, some of you are criticizing us for saying that. We accepted the meal. And he's like, his excuse is, well, they set up the fight, so they should have treated us to the meal. So, we're trying to be a good team. He's talking about mians and talking about face. So there's a buffet, but there was no buffet given to them. So they were asking and calling, and so they were gonna go eat on their own, and then they're like, okay, we gave you food. It's at room 305. So he's like, okay, well, they gave us food, so we went. So we went to the place. 2个菜 means two entrees. A mo is like a bun, so like buns. And then a tang means a soup. They had a kind of a 4-course meal. And then they finished the food. We asked the server, is there any more? They're like, no, just this. And he's like, yeah, that's what the server said. So they're like, okay, can you give us some rice at least? We didn't feel full. Ding Hao, the guy who Xiaodong kicked his butt, apparently Ding Hao has a really big appetite. So everyone in his Wing Chun dojo knew. So apparently this is how big the amount of rice Ding Hao eats. And apparently, usually he eats 3 of those. 3 bowls. And you have to have entrees, that's what he says. So he's like, oh, you can't just give us tang tang shui shui means soup. You can't just give us soup. It's not enough. So they're like, okay. So after they finished eating, he asked all his students, he's like, are you guys full? Oh, whatever. It's okay. You know, if we are hungry later on, we can at least go and get some snacks. So the interviewer's asking, so basically you guys for lunch just had 2 entrees. He's like, yeah, just that. So then they went to the supermarket to buy chocolate crackers. So the interviewer is now pressing him. So you feel like the reason you didn't beat the one-armed boxer was because you didn't feel full when you had your lunch? He's like, 不能说没关系, so I can't say that it didn't have an effect. Very indirect way of saying it. So now the interviewer's like, so did you eat before the 8 o'clock match with the one-armed boxer? So he's like, no, I didn't eat. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they were backstage on the ring. Like they had people everywhere, and they were looking at them, and had. So now the server's like, did you guys eat the crackers you bought? He's like, no, we didn't eat the crackers we bought. He's like, I think I ate 1 chocolate. So the interviewer's like, was your stomach hungry when you were fighting the one-armed boxer? He's like, yes. Yeah, I usually eat at 5 or 6. So he's like, it definitely affected your performance. He's so indirect. He's like, I can't say it didn't have an effect. Double negatives, man. But he says he doesn't think it's the most important thing. but he says, 影响是肯定有. So yeah, there was an effect. Okay, that was interesting. So interviewers saying, look, it looks like you guys can't beat the MMA people and the boxer. Like, you guys don't have any real fight. So he's like, that's not complete. 不客观, it's not objective. It's not real. Why, he says? This is what he explained. So he's like, okay, it has to do with how the competition's held. So traditional martial arts, 80 to 90% is not fought in a lei tai or a ring or a cage. A lot of the 练习方式, a lot of the practice of traditional martial arts is in your way of life, and it's not just in a ring or a combat. So what does he mean? So let's say he has some challenges in his life. He can protect himself, and that's enough. So the interviewer's like, so you haven't really hit anyone? So he's like, well, just because I haven't fought anyone does not mean I can't fight. Which, by the way, he has fought someone. He fought like a karate guy. What he's admitting here is that was kind of just sparring. Interesting. So he's like, I can't just, to prove that I can fight, go fight someone, right? Or hit someone. So, oh yeah, that was him. So he's saying his student, the guy that Xiaodong beat, fought a Muay Thai guy and fought a karate guy. I thought that was him, though. I guess I was wrong. It was Ding Hao. So he has not fought, but his student was the one that fought those matches that some of you have sent me. So he's saying, yeah, look at Ding Hao. So are you saying he's fake? So the interviewer's very being aggressive here. The interviewer's saying, but we don't know those Muay Thai and those Taekwondo or karate people, what their actual levels were. So he's saying, okay, yeah, they were all just amateurs. So we're amateur Wing Chun too. Or 业余方向, so kind of in the amateur direction. This guy's really good with his words. He's not saying they're amateur, but he's saying they're training in the amateur direction. So he's like, one way to practice traditional kung fu is for old and middle-aged people. And they can use Wing Chun and something to get some muscle and help their joints. And then young people, like Ding Hao, they can... So the more kind of combat part of Wing Chun. So it's like young people, it's more about the combat part of Wing Chun. So if you say Wing Chun's fake, maybe you could convince them. But if you're going to tell Ding Hao that Wing Chun's fake, don't do it, then you're not going to succeed. So he's saying Ding Hao has already proved himself many times with his Wing Chun. So he's saying, I'm not saying Wing Chun's fake, the interviewer's saying, but maybe it just doesn't have as much combat abilities. So he's quoting another Wing Chun or traditional martial arts guy, Wang Zhanjun. The guy also had conflict with Xiaodong. So he's like, well, winning or losing in combat, it's kind of, sometimes it has to deal with the situation and chance, which is true. I mean, that is a good point. So he's like, look at our Olympic team. Everyone wants to have a gold medal. Oh, and then usually before the Olympics, people would make a prediction as to how many gold medals they'd have. But, during the actual ceremonies, things will happen. And so the interviewer agrees, but he presses more. So look, he's saying he's Wai Hang. So the interviewer's saying, I'm not a martial artist per se, but from my perspective, not in the martial arts, it looked like the two sides, the Wing Chun and the side versus the boxing and the MMA side, had a big difference. Yeah, so he's like, yeah, so you're saying like it was way in favor of the MMA and the boxers. So he's like, okay, you can think that. People will think that. He's like, okay, I'm not gonna disagree. Competition is competition. Living is living. What is he talking? He's like quoting ancient Chinese poetry now. If it's my life, and I get into a situation, and maybe I'll just throw two fists, throw two punches, and just run, and I don't have to stay on the spot. But in a competition, you can't just do that. So it's like testing a different ability. So this interviewer is saying, but if you run away, doesn't that mean that you lost the fight? Which, by the way, I'm just going to comment now, that does not necessarily mean you lost the fight. If you run away, the guy's bigger, the guy wants to kill you, and you ran away, you won. You didn't get killed. But okay, let's see what he says. So he's saying, look, but if you run away, then wushu or kung fu didn't really protect you per se, right? You're using running, you're not using kung fu. That is a good point. He's like, no. So he's like, I protected myself. So it's like defense is a way of combat. So if I feel like someone's threatening me, and he launches a punch at me, and I blocked it, and then I don't fight him, I run. He thinks I'm afraid of him, and I lost. It doesn't matter. That's 生活智慧, so kind of like your intelligence in living, or yeah. So what if I beat him? I'm just going to commentate real quick. He does make a good point. I mean, I always tell people, you can watch this channel, you can train fighting or whatever, but in a street situation, don't get into a fight, man. It's not worth it. So he's absolutely right, but he's using this to say that justifies me not being able to really fight. I mean, he's kind of going around the question, not really answering the question, which is, the interview's like, yeah, but like if you had to fight, like you were forced to fight, then Wing Chun wasn't that useful for you. I agree with his point, but he's not admitting that at least his form of Wing Chun just couldn't beat the one-armed boxer. So look at all that. Boom. So showing some replays. Boom. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Boom. Little dropped. So we're going to translate a little bit more, and then we'll see. So now he's talking about respect. So he's saying, what do you think about after a round of fighting, they gave you the loss, gave the boxer the win? Do you think you can accept that? So he's like, you can't unify the judging rules. Uh-oh. So he's saying, look, I chopped him. I kung fu chopped him a few times. Like that. Or my punch kind of grazed him. Because in Wing Chun, there's a lot of straight punches. And then look, when he did the 12-6 elbows, or hitting the back, he's like, those didn't count as points. So in your heart, the interviewer asks, in your heart, you don't agree with the results of the judges? He's like, why should I agree? He's not saying I don't agree that I could lose. So apparently, I don't know what the context is, but apparently he was hurt or something during the match, or he had an injury going into the match. That's what he just said. But so now the interviewer's going along with what he said. He's like, okay, so like if we applied your criteria, like all the little hits you gave to the boxer, he's like kick, 摔走, so like elbows, 劈掌, like the palm techniques. So the interview's like, yeah, so if you count all of those, then you feel like you win or he won. He was like, oh, it doesn't matter, honestly. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about those details. Why? Because it just doesn't make sense. There are a lot of problems in the match. So our interviewer's like, yeah, but he punched you and dropped you. So he says that's a coincidence. The Wing Chun guy says that was the fact that the boxer clipped him in the jaw was a complete coincidence. He's not giving the boxer any skill, any credit. This is really funny. 只是个巧合. Now the interviewer's like, yeah, you're saying it's complete coincidence. He's like, yeah, I was throwing a kick. That leg had an injury. And he's like, well, I had an injury on my leg and I got dropped and I still stood up, so that wasn't a knockout. So what our interviewer's saying is, so you're saying the punch didn't mean anything. He's like, no, yeah, that doesn't mean anything. So he's saying, if you thought I lost because of that punch, yeah, whatever. In all these matches, there's always discussion and debate about the judging. So it's like, so what if, like, I feel like I was robbed once? It's like, it's whatever. So he's saying, okay, MMA versus traditional Kung Fu or Sanda. So what kind of rule should be used? He's really trying to get into this guy's psychology. We don't have enough time to really figure all of this out. And then we also can't get everyone to accept it. But this competition is to make friends and to test our abilities. Huh. Alright guys, you guys can watch the rest of it. If you guys really want me to translate the rest of it, I could, but this guy's just talking in circles, so it's not like we're going to really learn anything. I mean, he does make some good points. I'm not going to say he doesn't make any bad points. Or sorry, I'm not going to say that he doesn't make any good points, but you can tell he just can't accept that the boxer outboxed him. It's really funny. Okay, guys, more to come. Seriously, if you guys do want me to translate more, I will. It just takes a while. But thank you guys so much, and this was Fight Commentary Breakdowns out.